They're calling it mercy, but it's starting to look a lot like arrogance. The young Keller student muttered, his reptilian eyes wide as he scanned the human report on his hollow tablet. The class had been abuzz ever since the humans had sent their ultimatum to the Galactic Coalition. The Keller professor, a grizzled old veteran of several interspecies conflicts, flicked his tail in agitation. Arrogance? No, more like overconfidence, the professor growled, pacing at the front of the room. Humans are peculiar. They've waged countless wars on their own planet. Wars that would make the bloodiest conflicts in this galaxy look like child's play. And now they refuse to engage, claiming they do so out of pity. Bah! They underestimate us. The student, who had signed up for this course on intergalactic diplomacy hoping for something less intense, swallowed hard. But Professor, they've amassed a fleet. It's heading straight for Vildar Prime. If they're so confident, why bring such a force? The professor stopped pacing and looked at his pupil with a weary expression. That's what I'm trying to understand myself. Humans claim they don't want war, yet they send their warships anyway. It's as if they're saying, we could annihilate you, but we'd rather not, out of respect for your lives. It's an insult, and it's terrifying. Another student, a burly creature from the Zorth system, raised a clawed hand. Professor, could it be a strategy? Perhaps they're hoping to intimidate us into surrender without firing a shot? The professor nodded slowly. That's likely. Humans have a strange way of fighting wars. They've mastered psychological warfare. They know that fear can be more effective than any weapon. But we must not let them see our fear. We must prepare to fight. The young Keller, still fixated on the report, shook his head. But what if they're serious? What if they really do see war with us as beneath them? A low murmur spread through the class as the professor's face hardened. Then we'll show them that we are not beneath anyone. We'll give them the war they claim they don't want. As the class ended, the Keller student couldn't shake the uneasy feeling growing in his chest. He had read the human histories, studied their tactics, and now, facing the reality of their looming fleet, he realized something that sent a chill down his spine. The humans were not just avoiding war out of pity. They were avoiding it because they had already calculated the outcome. To them, this conflict wasn't a challenge. It was a chore. Days later, the Coalition's forces stood ready on Vildar Prime, a strategic planet known for its defensive fortifications. Armadas from every allied species hovered in orbit, bristling with weaponry. They had pulled their finest ships, their most seasoned commanders, and every resource they could muster. Yet, when the human fleet arrived, it was nothing like they had expected. The Keller student watched from the planet's surface as the human ships emerged from hyperspace. They were sleek, dark, and silent, like predators slipping into their hunting grounds. The alien forces, bracing for battle, readied their weapons, but the humans made no move to engage. Are they mocking us? The student whispered to himself, observing the eerie calm of the human fleet. The Coalition commanders were baffled. Despite the overwhelming firepower at their disposal, the humans held back their ships, remaining at a safe distance. It was as if they were waiting for something. Finally, the human fleet sent a broadcast to the Coalition command. The message, which was transmitted across all frequencies, appeared on screens across the planet and aboard every ship. This is Admiral Kane of the United Earth Fleet. We repeat, we do not wish for war. We acknowledge your right to defend yourselves, but be aware that continuing this course of action will lead to total annihilation. We offer you one final chance to stand down. We do this not out of fear, but out of a desire to spare your people the horrors that we are capable of unleashing. Choose wisely. The message ended, and the human ships remained still, engines humming at low power. The Keller student, listening to the words, felt a strange mix of emotions. There was no bravado, no threats, just a cold statement of fact. He turned to the professor, who stood nearby, his usual stern demeanor softened by uncertainty. Professor, what do we do? The professor's eyes were locked on the human fleet, his mind racing through every possible scenario. We cannot show weakness, he finally said, though his voice lacked its usual conviction. We have to make a stand. If we surrender now, we'll be nothing but slaves to human mercy. As the orders to prepare for battle spread through the ranks, the student couldn't help but glance back at the human ships one more time. In his gut, he knew this wasn't going to end well for them, but what choice did they have? The Coalition forces launched their first wave of attacks, missiles and energy beams streaking across the void. The humans, however, didn't retaliate immediately. Instead, their ships seemed to absorb the initial barrage, shields flaring with brilliant light as they shrugged off the damage. Then, with cold, methodical precision, the human fleet began its counteroffensive. The human fleet moved with a terrifying grace, each ship in perfect sync as they began their counteroffensive. They didn't rush, didn't make any sudden moves. Instead, they advanced slowly, almost casually, as if daring the coalition to strike again. The Keller student watched from his station in the command center, his heart pounding in his chest. He had never seen anything like this. The coalition forces, made up of dozens of species, each with their own tactics and strategies, were in disarray. Commanders barked orders over comms, desperate to regroup and mount a coordinated defense, but the human ships were already inside their formations. The first human volley was not a barrage of missiles or energy beams but a series of pinpoint strikes. They targeted the coalition's communication relays, weapon systems, and key infrastructure with surgical precision. In an instant, entire ships were rendered useless, their systems fried or their engines disabled. The human ships moved through the chaos like predators, picking off the most dangerous targets with chilling efficiency. "Professor, they're disabling our ships without destroying them," the student gasped, his eyes glued to the tactical display. "It's like they don't even see us as a threat." The professor's face was a mask of grim resolve, his gaze fixed on the unfolding battle. "They're sending a message, one that's louder than any explosion. We could destroy you, but we choose not to." They're proving their point with every move they make. As the coalition's forces struggled to mount a counterattack, the humans continued their relentless advance. Their ships cut through the defenses with ease, every maneuver executed with perfect timing. The coalition's once mighty fleet was being systematically dismantled, piece by piece, and there was nothing they could do to stop it. On the surface of Vildar Prime, panic was setting in. Soldiers and civilians alike watched in horror as the sky above them lit up with the flashes of battle. The planet's ground defenses had been activated, but even they seemed woefully inadequate against the human onslaught. Anti-aircraft batteries fired volleys of plasma and rockets, but the human ships simply evaded them with ease, their movements too fast and too precise for the automated targeting systems. In the command center, the Keller student's hands trembled as he tried to process what he was witnessing. "Why aren't they finishing us off?" he whispered, more to himself than to anyone else. "They have the power to end this now, but they're holding back." The professor's voice was low, almost resigned. "Because they want us to know exactly how outmatched we are. They're not just winning this battle. They're making sure we understand that resistance is futile." As if to emphasize the point, the human fleet unleashed a new wave of attacks, this time targeting the coalition's largest capital ships. Massive dreadnoughts and battle cruisers, symbols of the coalition's military might, were reduced to flaming wrecks in seconds. The humans didn't destroy them outright, but instead crippled them, leaving them adrift and defenseless. The students' comms unit crackled to life as frantic voices from the coalition fleet filled the airwaves. Commanders were begging for reinforcements, calling for retreat, or simply screaming in desperation as their ships were torn apart around them. The Keller student could feel the fear and despair in their voices, a fear that had spread through the entire coalition like wildfire. But in the midst of the chaos, one voice cut through the noise. A calm, steady voice that sent chills down the student's spine. "This is Admiral Kane to all coalition forces. You are defeated. Further resistance is meaningless. We offer you one final chance to surrender. You will not receive another." The message was short, to the point, and delivered without a hint of emotion. It was not a request, but a statement of fact. The human fleet had the coalition in a stranglehold, and everyone knew it. The professor clenched his fists, his tail flicking nervously. "They're giving us a choice. Surrender or be annihilated. But can we really surrender? What happens if we do?" The student looked up from his console, his mind racing. Maybe they'll show us mercy. If they wanted to wipe us out, they would have done it already. Perhaps they really do want to avoid unnecessary bloodshed." The professor shook his head. "Mercy from the species that's systematically dismantling our entire fleet? No, this is about control. They want us to submit, to acknowledge their superiority. If we surrender, we'll be at their mercy forever." But even as he said the words, the professor knew there was no other choice. The coalition was beaten, their forces shattered, their will broken. Resistance was no longer an option.